forbidden parameters, but you may not know it. In fact, even the company doing it may not be aware of it. So in which case, they may be in fact violating the law because they're using a machine learning algorithm that learned characteristics without ever, looking at the forbidden characteristics, other characteristics are related to them, and you end up with that. And one of the things that is worrisome to a lot of people is, in many cases, you can't look at the machine learning program and the data it's based on and really understand what it's doing, explain how it's behaving. So that's a problem. So what can we do about that with these problems with current technologies? There are some technologies we talked about, anonymization. The place in the U.S. where that comes into play the most, perhaps, is in medical records, because under HIPAA, which governs information that's held by in health records infrastructure, not necessarily separation. So if you have information and you remove 17, I believe it's 17 specific parameters from that information, including name, address, social security number, 14 others, then that record is deemed to be de-identified. It's deemed to be anonymous, and now you can use it for research and be more or less immune from being prosecuted. Doesn't mean it's really de-identified. Almost nothing is really de-identified these days. But it provides a recipe for people to use. Differential privacy. I think there was a paper using this technique this morning. The idea is that you can prevent the inference that a subject is included or not in a data set, in effect by adding noise to the data. Problem with that is you can sort of use up the data set. If you ask enough questions of it, the next question is liable to reveal an identity and you won't be able to use it anymore. And of course, you have this problem that you're adding noise to the results, so how accurate it's going to be, you'll lose some degree of accuracy. Private information retrieval, this is where through cryptographic techniques you can basically encrypt a database in a certain way and encrypt a question in a certain way, and the holder of the database can't tell what question was asked, but the answer gets sent back, and the person asking the question can decrypt the answer without the owner of the database knowing what the question was. They raise policy questions about if there are certain questions you don't want to ask of your database. Think about that as well. But that's a technique that's was thought of a long time ago and was, too computationally burdensome to be practical. It's now getting to the point where it's getting close to practical. It's actually being used in a few places or variations of it. There are some Canadian hospitals that share information about infection rates. They don't want to reveal their infection rate to all their colleagues, but collectively they want to know what the infection rates are, and they're using this technique. Up there for that. So I think that's going to be coming in. Fully homomorphic encryption is where you actually encrypt the data and the computation effect, so that you can run an encrypted computation fully. One of the imagined applications is you can run this in the cloud, and the cloud provider can't see what you computed at all. You get the result back decrypted. This wasn't known to be possible, of course, until about, I think it was 2009, when Greg Gentry produced some new results. Again, he showed it was theoretically possible, but it was very impractical. DARPA has invested a lot of money making it more practical. It's still too far from being practical to use today, but in 5 years maybe there'll be ways to do it at least in some districts. So there are some technologies. But I think that, in general, those problems that we had in the previous slide are going to remain with us for a while. So I want to put in front of you a potential social contract, the kind of thing that I would be willing to put in front of the public and defend. What we might say. So this is the way the contract might read. In order to gain the postulated societal benefits, we have a slide for those, acknowledging specified risks. Okay, we're not going to get rid of all the risks in managing this data. There are going to be privacy risks there. subject agrees to provide the data for analysis, the data holders have to agree to be held to account for mishandling of the data. I think that's the other end of the contract that has to get signed up to, and there have to be specified means of redress. And with that, I think the researcher and the subject could sign off on that. That's the argument.
I like this presentation format. All of these privacy notices should be in this format where you can click on societal benefits, see what the benefits are, and then look at the risk and so on, instead of having this long statement that goes on and on and on.
That would be a better way to do it. I think the question is creating the environment in which it's in the interest of the company to do it that way. Okay.
Well, there's a separate issue in that the FTC only enforces what the company promises. So if the company officially says we're going to screw you every time we can do it, it's okay. The FTC is perfectly okay with that.
As I said, the trick is to find the environment to make the incentives produce that result. We may not have the right incentives in place to produce that result today. I think I could agree with you on that.
We have some representatives from companies, so please note this addition.
So my question for you folks is this: what do we need to learn in order to enable that contract? To make that, so this contract calls for a lot. It says, I'm going to provide my data. I understand there are some risks. You guys holding the data have to agree to be accountable for mishandling. So I think, could you sign up to that today? Would you know if somebody mishandled your data, for example? How would you know that? So these are some research areas that I think could help us. In the first case, better language for specifying privacy policies. We want to be able to support algorithmic enforcement of those policies. I think that's a computer science problem, and we want to be able to support user comprehension. So this has got to be, you've got to have some people who understand human experiments and can work with you on that. We've been working on this. This is not really a new topic. Lori Craner and others have worked on this. She's now actually at the FTC, so she'll exercise some leverage there. So that's one area, I think in referring back to my attraction to Helen Nissenbaum's formulation of informational privacy as contextual integrity, I think we need better sort of domain-specific definitions of privacy. So one of the contrasts between the U.S. and the EU is the U.S. has taken what's referred to as a sectoral approach to privacy regulation, which just means we regulate things by sectors. So we have a law that applies to credit reporting, okay, and that governs credit information. We have other laws that apply to medical records, HIPAA, right, applies to healthcare data. We have even laws that apply to video rental records, right? Remember the reason for that? It was another Supreme Court nomination, okay? And I don't think they were so worried about the nominees' records, but I think they all realized suddenly that their own records were at risk for this kind of exposure. So we don't have videotape rental stores anymore, but at least very few, but I think they've extended it to DVR records, although I'm not really sure how that applies to video on demand records. Anyway, so we've taken a sectoral approach to privacy. We've got different areas. Educational records, probably some of you are familiar with this. I've read about it. FERPA. So I think informational privacy calls, as contextual integrity calls for us to define the contexts that are important and try to identify rules for information to leave that context and the penalties for improper removal. So I think this is an area that could be researched. This to me is fundamental and very much a computer science kind of problem. Techniques for tracking information flow within and among systems. Okay, if we really want to know whether one piece of information has influenced another, then we need to be able to track information flow in systems. We know how to do that to some degree, but probably not at the scale we need to. And we need to build systems that are built on premise. Okay. We also are going to need this, I think, for other reasons. We need to establish provenance for scientific data. Our scientific data is almost all on computers these days, not only the data, but the programs that are used to process it. Okay? If you want to repeat somebody's experiment, you need to be able to be sure of the provenance of your software data. So I think that's an area that's very important. We can do it within programs, typically across systems of programs. We need more work. This is important to be able to do this for a whole variety of reasons, and whether you want to try to do it at the level of adding tags to information and tagging everything, or whether there's a better way to do it, I think is an open question. We need to be able to bind policies to data. We'd like to be able to enable basically usage-based controls. So we could, if we have permission to use this data for some purpose, we'd like to be able to have access control that says, okay, we can tell what the purpose is. And there's been some work to retrospectively look at the kinds of access there were and try to infer what the purpose was behind it. But I think we need to be able to do that. We'd also like to enable distributed enforcement of policies. If you can bundle the data with the policy and have a policy, an engine that can enforce whatever policy came with the data, that seems like a useful device. You also might bind an audit trail to the data, in which case you can perhaps support for information flow tracking. And of course, it's many people would consider bugaboo, but it's also that's basically digital rights management. Okay, this to me is very important. We need to be, if we want to improve or affect the way that private data is handled, we have to have accountability for the handling of it. And, so we need to be able to detect when violations occur, and I think violations will occur. You have to accept that as a premise. People need to have confidence that when the violations occur, someone can be held to account. Right now, accountability, of course, is a huge problem if you think about even cyber warfare. Okay, who is behind this attack? Well, that's a very hard question to answer in many cases, just from the data that you've got. Oh, well, no, it keeps going. So I think this is a key part of this to enable the social contract. You need to have confidence that when something bad happens, you can actually point the finger at some organization. And I think information flow tracking might be one way to help that, but we need other tools. Okay, this is in the how do you quantify the benefits? What am I going to get for giving up my data? We need. I don't pretend to have any great insights in this area, but you can see that there's a need. We need to be able to identify what kind of benefits there are. We think there are going to be, and you should at the very base level. If you're saying I want to use this data for something, you should have a story about what do I expect to get out of that use. If your research project needs this data, what's the positive benefit that you expect from your research project? If you can't say that, then probably if I'm holding the data, I'd say, well, if you just want to play around with it, why should I get it? I want at least a story about that, and if you quantify it in some way, that would be better. And that's okay. This is another area where it would be for social scientists to study, but the effects of surveillance on groups of people of different sizes. Mass surveillance is widely argued to lead